So welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I want to talk to you about the most discussed subject when it comes down to Micro Four Thirds cameras like this OM-1 Mark II or any OM system camera at the moment. They're all Micro Four Thirds cameras, and that is noise. Everything I hear people talk about is there is too much noise in the system. But then I released a video last week where I visited a photo hide and I got a dozen emails from people saying, how do you get such low noise images at ISO 6400? Well, there is a simple reason for it. Because you can. You know, it's very simple. It is just possible with a Micro Four Thirds camera. And I don't know why people say it's not possible, because it isn't a problem anymore these days, especially if you take the tricks that I am going to tell you in consideration. And with the current noise removal tools in post-processing, noise isn't an issue anymore, especially not underneath ISO 10,000. So let me show you a couple of example images that will explain the technique, because most of it is done by preventing noise. So one of the most important tools on my camera is, let me show you here in the back, is this thing here in the corner, the histogram. And the only thing I look for when I take an image is that histogram. I don't want to overexpose my images, but I don't want them to get too dark. So if you look at the perfect exposure in the bottom, usually people say when it's exactly in the middle at 0, that is the perfect exposure. Well, with a Micro Four Thirds camera, the trick is to overexpose the images a little bit, like 0.3, 0.7 is usually enough to do the trick. Let me show you a couple of examples where I can show you the difference between a little underexposed image and a little overexposed image. And that's when you get to see the difference in noise performance. So let me show you this image here on the computer. So this is an image from a recent video, and I did a lot of brackets that morning, which makes it really easy to show you a difference, because you can see here I get a lot of different exposures from this same image. So now let's look at, for example, this one. So not too dark, but you can see that the peaks of this histogram here in the right top are a little bit on the left side of the histogram. If I look at this one, you can see the peaks are more on the right side of the histogram. So let's bring both of these exposures to the same amount of exposure. So let's lower this one a little bit, and let's increase the exposure a little bit on this image. So let's have a look if that is about the same. Well, I can't believe it, but I almost exactly mirrored that noise level. So, and let's just put one image on one side and put this one over here. So you see we have image 41 and image 43, and this is at ISO 200. You know, the ISO level at 200 is just really good. There's almost no noise visible, but it does show you pretty good what I'm talking about. So let's zoom into both images about the same levels. So let's click in the same spot on the image, and you can see on the right side we have the image with the darker exposure, and on the left side is the brighter exposure. So you can see that this image is a lot cleaner, and you can especially see it down here. Just look at how clean this left image is and how noisy that right image is. And the only thing I did differently is overexpose that image just a little bit, and then turn the exposure down in post-processing. And you know, if you look at it like this, it doesn't make much difference. But once you zoom in, especially to the darker parts, you can clearly see that that left image is much more free of noise than the right image. And this is without noise reduction. So there's no noise reduction applied on this stage at the moment. So what I did in this case, because you can see there is not a perfect exposure in here, one is too bright, one is too dark. I think this is the best exposure, this image, if you look at the histogram up here, but there's still quite a peak on that right side that overexposes the sun. So in this case, I took this whole bunch of images like this, and I've combined them into one HDR shot with Lightroom. So I right-clicked on them and then made it one HDR. So that's Control H, that's the smart key to do that. And that eventually became this image. So you can see the sun is not overexposed, and the dark images still have enough details in them. And there's almost no noise visible in this image. But this is at ISO 200, and in this case I can make a bracket and choose the best exposure or combine exposures together. And that's why I hear people say, well, you can't do that with wildlife, and that's why you need a full frame camera. Well, total rubbish, total rubbish. Just let's go to the images that I shot in the photo hide last week, which you've seen the pictures of, and let's go to, for example, this image. This is the final edit that you're looking at right now of this squirrel looking at me, and this is the original raw file of it. So this is the unedited version. And you can see this is at ISO 6400. 6400, and it is still a pretty dark image. So it's pretty dark when I shot this shot. And so I moved it around a little bit, and especially I increased it locally with, you can see I increased the local adjustment here on the squirrel. But the trick with an image like this, and let me just show you a quick edit. So I always go for my favorite color profile first, so I always use landscapes, even if it's a bird or an animal. And let's just do a small basic edit here. So a little less contrast. Maybe raise that exposure just a tiny bit, something like this. So I think this is a normal procedure. So now let's have a look. You can see there is a lot of noise in this image at ISO 6400. But you can see that everything is pin sharp in focus. So that is very important. Your image just has to be in focus. And that's why I rather take an image at ISO 6400 than an image at, let's say, ISO 1000. Because at ISO 1000, my shutter speed would have been lower, and I would have lost a bit of sharpness in this image. And what happens if you have an image that is not perfectly sharp? Then the noise reduction software that you will use will see that as noise, and then it starts clearing out the noise, and you will lose detail in your image. But as long as you keep the exposure all right and you keep the sharpness perfect, then ISO 6400 is not a problem with current noise reduction software. Just have a look here. If I go to noise reduction here, just have a look at what happens to this squirrel. It usually takes a few seconds, at least at my computer it takes a few seconds. And just look at it, those details, they are still perfectly intact here. And you can see that most of the noise is gone from this image. So what I like to do when I use this, I never change this this slider that tells you 50-50. What I do I do that, but I always increase the sharpness just a little bit after I denoised the image. But I can hear you say, well, but there is still some noise here in that dark background. Yes, there is. First of all, if you print, you will never see it. But if you're bothered by this, just use this layer mask here. for example, if you go to your layer masks and select subject, and look at what a good job Lightroom does. It exactly knows where the animal is. You can also do this with a little paintbrush and brush the whole animal in yourself. Really difficult. That this does a very, very good job. You can see that those nose hairs here, they are not covered in this red, which means that we are going to lose some detail there if we denoise that section too much. So let me show you what I always do in this case. So I've now selected the squirrel. If you go all the way up, it says here invert. Well, mine is in Dutch, but in your version it says invert. And in this case, I select everything except the squirrel. So you can see everything is selected. So I'm going down here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to reduce the noise even further on that part. Reduce the sharpness a little bit there, and especially this slider of texture. If you lower the texture, just look at how little noise. Let's put it here to 300% so you can see it. The difference it makes when I move that texture slider a little bit to the left. And voila, I've got a almost perfectly noise-free image. And it looks fantastic. So what I always like to do, I like to add another subject, and this time it selects the squirrel. And in this version, I just add a little bit contrast, and I increase a little bit of that sharpness in this version. So the squirrel is pin sharp, and everything around it is noise-free, as I would like it. So a lot of it is done when I take the image by getting a perfect exposure, but a lot of it is also done in post-processing. But the end results, I have a lot of friends with full-frame cameras, and we've compared images all the time. You know, if we go out together, we shoot almost the same images a lot of times. The end result is always the same. The only difference is that on a full-frame camera, it's much easier to take a darker exposure and then brighten it up in post-processing without raising those noise levels. But if you know that a Micro Four Thirds camera is better when you make a brighter image, just take a brighter shot and then lower the exposure in post-processing. So do it the other way around. The end result is exactly the same. And just to show you another image, let's have a look here. I have one. Let's take one of those sparrow hawks that I photographed. So let's look at this image. This is ISO 3200. That's maybe not so interesting. So let's take one that is this one. So this is ISO 6400 once again. So you can see it's a very noisy image. And this one is missing a little bit of sharpness here on the bird. But just have a look. Let's do the whole process again. I think this wasn't my final pick in this series, but I think it's nice to show you how I do this. Darken it a little bit and raise the highlights a little bit here. So now let's go to noise reduction, and this is at 300% by the way, so let's show it like this. Turn on noise reduction and just wait that couple of seconds. On my computer, on your computer, it might take longer. I've seen people do it like 1 or 2 minutes depending on how fast your computer is. And look at this image, you know, it has removed all that noise instantly. But in this case, you can see this wasn't a perfectly sharp exposure. It wasn't perfectly in focus. And that's why you seem to lose just a little bit. So I just increased the sharpness there a little. And let's do the same trick again. You can see there's still some noise here in the background. So I'm going to invert this mask. And once again, I'm going to remove some of that noise in the background, remove some of that sharpness, and remove a little bit of the texture. and I have a almost noise-free background. So I do it again, select my subject, increase the contrast a little bit, and increase the texture and sharpness here just a little bit, and you can see that I almost got the bird perfectly in focus now. And what I'm left with is a noise-free image that is perfectly in focus within a couple of clicks. You know, I don't over-edit my image. I don't spend hours on editing my images. Usually it's 2-3 minutes maximum, and then I move on to the next image. If the exposure is being all right, there's not much to do on the image. So most of the work you have to do is in the field, and make sure to shoot in RAW, because you can do everything with the image in post-processing. But even in JPEGs, the noise removal on the JPEGs is amazing in camera also. So yeah, look at it. I am absolutely satisfied with this image. And just to show you a couple of other ones, one of the favorites, this was one of my personal favorites of that morning with this reflection. Well, just look at all the details in this bird. You know, all details are here. There's almost no noise around the image. And this is at ISO 3200. You know, it is just a fantastic system if you photograph in a different way. So if you're coming from a full frame camera and you're trying to take the exact same images with exact same settings, yes, you will have more noise. But if you use a Micro Four Thirds camera as a Micro Four Thirds camera by overexposing it a little bit, darkening the exposure in post-processing, you will have the exact same results as a full frame camera. So I hope this showed you that noise is not that much of an issue anymore these days, if you know how to deal with it, how to handle it, and use post-processing. And I have a couple of different softwares, by the way. This is in Adobe Lightroom, but recently I downloaded a version of DxO PhotoLab 9. The denoise results are almost the same. Also with Topaz denoise, all these denoising softwares can do the exact same thing. The only thing I like most in Lightroom is that after the general denoise, you can use masks to do some local denoising. And that's a little bit more difficult in example Topaz denoise or DxO PhotoLab. But Lightroom does a fantastic job in that. So yeah, I hear people complain all the time that Lightroom has got too expensive. I agree, it is expensive, but it does a hell of a job, if you ask me. And I've tested a lot of these softwares, and for me, Lightroom is still the standard in photo editing because you can simply do the most advanced things with it. So this is not sponsored by Adobe or Lightroom or any other brand. This is just my own experience. I'm not sponsored in any post-processing software at all. So this is just my own personal experience by trying out different editing photos like Lightroom, Topaz, DxO, Affinity Photo. I've tested them all, and for me personally, Lightroom is still the benchmark when it comes to photo editing. So I hope this showed you a little bit of the technique that I use when editing photos, and hopefully you can use it to your advantage. But keep in mind, in landscapes it isn't an issue at all because you're at a low ISO level and you can always bracket or take a high-res image. There are so many solutions as a landscape photographer to have zero noise. In wildlife, just make sure your exposure is right, that it is in focus, it's pin sharp, and then it is not an issue at all. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and I hope to see you on the next video. Please push the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. And there is a subscribe button underneath here. Some people can hype this video. If you've liked it, please push the hype button if you have that. You first have to push the thumbs up button and then the hype button will appear. But not everyone has this hype button at the moment. It's some kind of experimental YouTube thing that I don't know anything about further. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope to see you on the next video, and bye bye.